This is the MedicCast, June 20th, 2011.
Transmitters? We don't need no stinking transmitters.
This is the MedicCast, a podcast for EMS providers by EMS providers, featuring EMS news, products, tips, tricks, and commentary. So grab your gear and glove up. Here's today's show with the Podmedic, Jamie Davis.
Well, good day and welcome to this week's episode of the MedicCast. I'm your host, Jamie Davis, and the Podmedic, of course, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the show this week. If you haven't already done so, make sure you get over and check out the website this week at mediccast.com/blog. There's resources, additional articles, links to everything discussed in this episode in the show notes for this episode, and you'll all find that over at the MedicCast site at mediccast.com/blog. If you want to get back in touch with me, of course, you can leave an article, comment on any of the articles on the site, and you can also always reach me by email at podmedic@mac.com and call in on the voicemail line 941-306-3342, 941-30-MEDIC. I get back to you. I try to respond to every email and contact I get. And so if you need to get in touch with me, call in or email in or leave a comment on the site. Either way, and I will respond to you. And it's great to hear from you, as always, and continue to support the show. So thanks a lot. Let's jump into the listener mail, and just a few items this week again. Checking in. Listener Susan checked in over on the Facebook page and was asking a question about how she could get some information, or maybe I would be able to do a show on aortic aneurysms, and also maybe something on heart or lung sounds. I actually, Susan, have done an episode on lung sounds and auscultation of the chest, and so you can find that, I think, if you go and search lung sounds or breath sounds over at the MedicCast site. That's been done in the past. I'll have to check out, see how long ago it was. Maybe it's time for a refresher, but I do appreciate the comments, and I'm not sure about aortic aneurysms. I'll have to check that one out, but it's something we should probably go over and review, because it's a little scary. I actually can tell you that my first solo cardiac arrest as a paramedic was an aortic aneurysm that blew out. And, there was no saving the patient. I tried, obviously, but it was just one of those things. And it was one of the oddest calls I was on, and it was very surreal. I can still picture that whole situation. And it's one of those things that you need to really keep your mind wrapped around and try to review from time to time. So we'll try to review it here. And, as always, I like to get these kind of comments in when I am sitting here every week trying to come up with another tip of the week or another interview segment or somebody else to talk to. It always is great to get those comments in from the listeners that say, hey, I'd like to see this. I'd like to hear about this. I'd like you to review these things. It really encourages me and says, hey, this is something that you guys want to hear more about. So keep doing that. Susan, thanks a lot. And again, you can catch up with me any old way, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or email or leaving comments on the website. All of them perfectly acceptable. And of course, Facebook is one of those ways. So thanks, Susan. Appreciate the comment. Also, just checking back into messages here. I'm going to have to say that we heard back from listener Peter. Peter is a student EMT. He's also one of the reviewers and is one of the people that's a moderator of the EMS Wikipedia information. He does a pretty good job, and he doesn't get stuck by trying to say he knows something he doesn't know, but he does do a good job of researching and is always looking for people to help him out over there. But listener Peter was checking in. He had a recent heat-related emergency come up and was curious because the paramedics kind of, I don't know, he said he felt a little belittled, I guess, because there was a child that had begun vomiting following an outdoor race in some extreme heat, and he was concerned and took the child to the aid station, and the paramedics said she really didn't need to go to the aid station. And so we talked a little bit about it, and brings up again those thoughts about, hey, it's summertime, time to pull out those heat emergency protocols and review and understand the different signs and symptoms associated with heat exhaustion versus heat stroke, and what are the different levels of hyperthermia and how do they present on your patient. What does hot and dry mean as opposed to warm and moist? These are all things that we need to keep in mind and help understand the physiology of what's going on when patients are trying to compensate for being overheated, because that'll help you understand what you're looking at in these patients. And it's one of those things that I think, Peter didn't do anything wrong. Whenever you're not sure, you always err on the side of your patient. So that's a good thing. But there are some, little tricks and things that you can get by reviewing some of your materials periodically. And this is a good time to do that as you start to learn these lessons and see, hey, this isn't something I need to be worried about. This is. You of course, again, always err on your patient's benefit and behalf. So I don't think there's anything wrong with checking up the line just in case. But certainly you can follow up and do some of that research ahead of time yourself. Peter, good job sending the question in, and keep in touch. I love hearing from you. And again, everybody else, send those comments, questions, and ideas in so that we can make this a community effort. So I know what you want to hear more of and what you want to hear less of. I don't always promise to take the show in the exact direction you all want it to. It is my show, and there are reasons I do this for myself. But certainly there's a lot of times when I can give you some information and resources that I think you might need for your own edification. Time now to jump into this week's news items, and we'll start off with a great story I found coming out of Ontario, Canada. The government in Ontario on June 1st adopted a new bill called the Ontario Award for Paramedic Bravery. This is in response to a line of duty death of a paramedic in that area. Paul Patterson was a paramedic in Ontario, died tragically during a winter storm and motor vehicle accident, apparently. But certainly responding in the line of duty, and when other people had the ability and the inclination to stay inside, emergency services still has to get out there, whether the roads are treacherous or not. And so I like this, and I wonder, does your area have an award for bravery for paramedics, EMS personnel? There's often those awards for firefighter service and police service, but the EMS service often gets left behind in these situations. So I wonder, is there a similar award that is available at the state or provincial level for your service as an EMS professional? And I'd love to hear from you and let me know what you know about and what you find out more of. But it's just it's heartwarming to see that there's some recognition. It's tragic that Paul died in this incident. That this happened, I guess, in 2007 when he passed away. But his family's been active in gaining recognition for paramedics for the work they do. And this bill is one of those things that has come about as a result of that. And I have to say, kudos to them for pushing forward this initiative and encouraging the government and the people of Ontario to recognize the work that they do as part of that, what they call in this article, the first responder triad, the police, fire, and EMS. So great idea there. Speaking of dangerous responses, the next item in the news has to do with chemical suicide. I don't know if you've heard about this. If you follow Rick Rosati's Mitigation Journal, you may have heard him talk about it in the past. This is a very hot button issue because some organizations out there think that by merely talking about it, we are encouraging it. No, we're not encouraging it, especially on this show. I mean, we're not encouraging it, but darn it, I don't want to see you or me or anybody I know die or become injured because some idiot carried out a chemical suicide and we weren't aware of what the dangers were. So we need to talk about it. If you don't like that we talk about it, turn it off. So that's my disclaimer here, because I know that there's been some people that have complained about the publicity associated with this. But you know what? Chemical suicide is a fact of life. And as first responders, it would be irresponsible of me not to educate you, the audience, about what goes on. So there's an article I found over at emsworld.com that talks about a recent chemical suicide in LA. And it talks about some of these dangers. Now, this first seemed to come to light when a celebrity in Japan used a website to create a chemical concoction that created a lethal gas and put herself in an enclosed space and died. Now people typically will go somewhere, park their car, combine the chemicals, form a noxious gas inside the vehicle, and beforehand they've posted all over the vehicle, call 911, harmful fatal gases inside, and then they dump the bottles together or do whatever they're doing and cause themselves to die. So suicide is a horrible thing. It's something we respond to, either attempts or completed suicides, as the case may be. But you do need to be aware that this could be something, especially in the situation where you have a suicide attempt. There may be chemical residual, there may be gases nearby, still in the location where somebody was found. And you should make sure that you're aware of what's going on and just kind of, again, this is part of that whole scene survey, part of what we do when we get to the scene. We need to assess the scene, and if we start seeing, hey, there's some chemical bottles in a pile there, and there's a big bowl, and this person tried to kill themselves with a chemical product, we need to be aware of how they did that. We need to be aware of how they, of the dangers associated with having contact with those things. And so, depending on your local protocols, depending on what your guidance is saying to do, you may need to call for hazardous materials people. It may require a localized evacuation or at least a sheltering in place for neighbors or something like that. Just something to be aware of. And I think that, again, this is not something we can just sweep under the rug. It's happening. You know, there's websites out there that show you how to do all kinds of scary things. Doesn't mean that we condone it when we talk about it. It just means that we need to be prepared and understand how these situations are going to crop up and protect ourselves. And I know Rick Rosati would agree with me on that. And again, if anyone has any problems with it, just turn the show off. That's all you have to do if it bothers you. But the responders and people listening to this program need to get that information. Finally, another article that has to do with something we started talking about last week, actually 2 articles from last week's show. We talked about the case in Alameda County where the individual had walked out into shallow water offshore and had waited until he was overcome by the cold and died, and that no rescue boats were available that could make it into that shallow water. So there was kind of a kerfuffle about that. There's your word for the week. But we do have another article here that is talking about a man who plunged into a quarry into shallow water and caused himself severe injuries and had to have a water rescue with 3 local companies coming together to perform a water rescue in this quarry, take him out, and then transport him to the hospital and trauma center. So this talks about a couple of things. Again, we revisit the idea of it's summertime, folks. Water-related injuries, outdoor-related injuries are going to be more common. If you have a lot of remote areas around you, if you have water, quarries, or other things, think about what's in your first run area. If somebody was found in the most difficult to get to place in your district, do you know how to get to them? Okay, there's the question to ask. You might have high-angle cliff climbing areas and mountain climbing areas. Well, guess what? Do you have resources to get up there and get a patient if they get stuck or injured? The same thing goes for water, for quarries, for caving. Anyone that's a spelunker out there could be, you know, you might have to do a rescue underground, that confined space rescue. So what do you know about? Again, think about the different types of places you have and how would you get to this patient to rescue them if they were found in these difficult to reach locations. Keep those things in mind. Keep in mind what's going on in your area seasonally, and also, you know, be aware of what resources are available to assist you when you have a patient that's difficult to reach or hard to treat for whatever reason. And this is a good example of that. So I want to thank you for checking out the show in the news this week. If you have a comment on any of these things, if you think I'm on the mark or off the mark on any of these, get back in touch with me. I welcome the discussion. Seriously, this is a community effort. I don't claim to have all the answers. I share my opinions. I'm not shy about doing that. But I don't certainly think that I have the only opinion or the only valid opinion. So share your ideas. You can leave a comment over in the show notes for this episode, or you can send me an email, a voicemail, or reach me on Facebook or Twitter or any other number of places, and let me know what you think of this week's episode. And this is going to be part 2 of the segment we started last week, where I was able to get Chris Kaiser from lifeunderthelights.com on the Skype line, and we spent quite a bit of time chatting about writing good narratives and documentation. And that discussion and conversation was a little bit longer than we could really do for one episode. So I told Chris we're going to probably split it into 2 parts. And so here's part 2 as we continue on with Chris Kaiser's advice and some of his 6 tricks on how to improve your narrative writing. And I would urge you, whether you're a long-term existing provider or a brand new provider or student, that you're going to find something from this episode to use. I don't think there's ever a time when you can't improve your writing skills, find a way to better document your medical calls. And it really is there to protect yourself, to give yourself a backup, as Chris and I discuss in the episode segment. So without further ado, let's jump on into part 2 of our segment with Chris Kaiser on narrative writing.
And it goes a little bit to, and I don't want to be the grammar police on this, but in the 6 trips, I talked about high school freshman English.
Yep.
And how they want you to use proper English and proper grammar. Mm-hmm. And we go into kind of a technical language when we're doing medical reporting. And that's if you read other medical reports and you get a chance to read other charts, which I suggest everybody does.
Right.
You'll see kind of what the vernacular is, what the terminology we use, not the medical terminology, but just how we sound, what your voice is when you're giving these reports. And it comes down to using proper grammar, trying to at least put an effort into spelling the bigger words, trying to use proper punctuation when appropriate, trying to do that. Because it is a legal document, and people judge other people based upon the quality of the way they write. Just as you...
Yeah, and I'll say that you want the jury to know that you think that you know what you're talking about, and it's judged by the way you write. If you come across like a second grader with your level of knowledge and the way you write, it casts doubt on your ability to have properly treated this patient in the first place and your expertise as a medical professional going forward if your narrative reads so miserably. Yeah.
And the other thing is the image of our profession as a whole. If you write with a second grade English understanding of English, and you write this run report that goes to the physician at the hospital, that goes to all the nurses there, that goes to the nurse on the floor, that goes to their primary care physician, and they look at it and they say, oh, EMS wrote this.
Yeah.
They look at it and they start laughing because of your grammar and spelling usage, then you have cast a bad light on my profession.
Yeah.
That's a bigger issue than maybe we're here to talk about, but there's a whole public image there. If they're looking at our reports and we, barely shouldn't be allowed a crayon and a piece of construction paper, that's something we should take care of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but writing the run reports, back to the freshman English, they use the 3-paragraph method that I learned from Mrs. Downey, my English teacher in 9th grade. The tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them.
That's just how I learned it.
That's the thing. And that goes into the style. I write the same report every time. And I don't write the SOAP. I write pretty much the chronological narrative, telling the story of the call, telling the story of how I got dispatched, what unit I was in, who dispatched me, how we proceeded, whether there was any delays in the response. Was it raining? Was there heavy traffic? Were we blocked by a garage door or something? Was there a lot of stairs? How did we find the patient? Were they sitting in the tripod position? Were they really working? Were they laying supine in their bed? Were they in the back bedroom? Just tell that stuff.
Right.
Then say what the patient told you. And then I actually write the word assessment. And I write my secondary assessment there. Whether the skin was fine, I put skin was pinform and dry. I put I put a full, and you can see it on the Soapy Pictures. There's a link off of my webpage for Soapy Pictures. I actually wrote 6 or 8 sample narratives and then a follow-up post on that of how I write my narratives. And you'll see I write assessment in capital letters with my secondary assessment to prove that I did that. You know, I looked at all these high points, and I hit these 14 high points in the patient's assessment. So nobody can say I missed something because there they are. There's the data. And then for my treatment, that's the very last, I put what I did. And the treatment plan is supposed to work off of the assessment that you had, because your decision-making skills work off of your assessment and your information that you had in the call. Right. So if I'm throwing an on breather mask on the guy, I'm, you know, progressing to go to CPAP, if I'm then knocking him down for RSI, you know, that information will be there, and it will flow in that, and will flow in a progression in that. And sometimes I'll go initial assessment, initial treatment, and then I'll put more information, and then put secondary assessment. Okay. And I build the report out as I do it, but it's my style that I've practiced every time. And it just works for me. And I've, over the years, developed the thing that makes it work for me. And I can go back to any one of my run reports and say, I know I wrote it that way. I know it's going to be good. Yep. I sleep better at night because I know my reports are up to stuff. I actually take the time to do it.
Yeah, and, you know, it's funny. I actually started out, when I started writing narratives, I actually made myself a template, a sample run report I created, and I saved it so that I could cut and paste it into the narrative, and then I could just add the details, making sure that everything that happened was written down, but it kept me going and made sure I didn't miss anything. So I had to fill in all the details in order based on the format I'd put in there. And, you know, over time, it makes it so you can be much more confident. When you get called up on the stand, you know that every sheet is going to have that information in there because you made sure it was in there. And you can back up your decisions and remember what you saw and what you did. It's absolutely peace of mind. You know, I think that's a great way to put it, Chris.
Oh, and the other trick is, when you're done with it, read it. If it doesn't make sense to you.
You know, wait a minute. I got to say, you mean I have to proofread everything I wrote down in my run sheet?
As a blogger, it takes me 17 years to get one blog post done because after every paragraph, I reread it 6 times and edit it.
Hey, question. Have you ever done this? Because I've done this before. I've gone back and looked at past blog posts, and I end up editing them. You know, something that I wrote and I thought was pretty happy with at the time, I still end up going back and finding something that I just don't like the way it's worded, and I start editing it, and it feels like I do a whole lot more.
I've gone back to some of my most popular posts and read them, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. Just looking at, what did I do? And the other trick is, maybe have your partner read it for a while. And, you know, I still will let other medics and other EMTs read my writing. I'll ask them, do you want to read the report? And they'll look at me quizzically because usually I'm the guy reading their report. But after a while they see, oh, you want to make sure that I want to make sure that I'm getting all the high points. That, you know, my mind, which is in 1,000 different places, we've had 3-4 calls since then. It's just been a hectic day. Right. To make sure that I didn't forget something. Okay. And I'll have my partner read my report still, just to make sure, hey, is this what you think you saw? Because you're going to be on the stand together. Yeah. So, and, you know, that brings up an interesting point. Some calls, I've even asked my driver partner to write a narrative themselves, or other members of the crew, to write up their version of events that might have happened on the scene, to support something that I did, decisions I made, because maybe there was an assault by a patient or the bystanders, something weird happened at the scene. Their narrative is important there, and when something unusual occurs, to back up what you have said, and vice versa. Absolutely. Another thing to do is, while you're running the call, think about how you're going to document what you're doing. Have a thought process running in the back of your mind saying, okay, I've decided to do this. Here's why I did, and here's how I'm going to write it.
Okay.
You know, there's a lot of things to think about during the call, but if you have to document it, make sure you're thinking about it. It helps when you get to the hospital, when you get to where you're going to write your report. It helps to do it. You know, maybe keep a cheat sheet. I mean, these are so low tech these days, and the kids are entering the vitals in their tough books as they're going down the road, which I'll admit I've started doing sometimes on transfers. But on a 911 call, I have a cheat sheet, and I just write on the cheat sheet what I need to go so I can give the needed attention to the patient.
You know, that's so important. I use the larger rectangular Post-it notes. They give me a note. I can stick it on a run sheet, on the monitor, on the wall. If I need to hand over care, I can use it to jot down information. I can put down patient details, initial vitals, just some basic stuff. If I have to like hand off and run to another call, I can put that down real quick on that Post-it note without having that electronic form right there in front of me and hand that to the nurse in the ER or another provider.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it just takes practice. It just takes practice and learning that there's certain things you have to do. There is a standard you're going to be held to, but you can practice, and there's a lot of people that will help you if you just ask. A lot of new EMTs freak out about the radio report too, giving a radio report to the hospital, and it just takes practice and saying, how'd I do? And remembering the same things. You can be writing great narratives if you just pay a little attention to it, take your time, think about what you're doing, and, of course, read my blog a lot and get the information I put out there for you. And watch the MedicCast as well.
You know, it's the best way to get good at writing narratives is to practice and work on your style. It's one of those things, you know, you'll get better and faster at writing your narratives. You'll be more accomplished the more you write. And each time you'll be a little bit faster, a little more confident going along with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Chris, thanks for writing the 6 tricks for improving your narrative. There's also a lot of other stuff on narrative writing on your site over at lifeunderthelights.com. How can folks best catch up with you online?
Well, first, I love to hear from EMTs. I love to hear from EMS people. It's so much fun because every EMS person is a hoot to talk to. And I do EMS tourism around the country, which means I hurt myself in new and interesting places. The other place you can reach me is always lifeunderthelights.com. You can find that on the web. You can find that on Facebook. We have a Facebook fan page. You'll find my articles also being posted up by the GEMS Facebook page a lot.
Okay.
I have a bi-monthly column that comes out on gems.com. My column this month is dealing with ambulance service disaster preparedness, and that should be up by the time that this gets posted.
Okay.
You'll find me on a lot of places, on some very fine quality podcasts, just like the MedicCast as well. And, of course, I have to plug the Chronicles of EMS. You'll find me there in a couple of the Seat at the Table episodes as well.
And I have to say to people, if you haven't checked out Seat at the Table, the show that Ted creates over at Chronicles of EMS, you're really missing an amazing program. High-level discussions with top EMS leadership and talking about how they make the decisions that affect you on the street every day, how they have to come up with those decisions and make them. And it's a great resource.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes they let me on, too.
Chris, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. This has been a great discussion on narrative writing, and I hope and I'm sure that the listeners are going to get so much out of it. But I want to thank you for sharing your experience and your expertise with the viewers and listeners here at the MedicCast.
Thanks, Jamie.
And I want to remind all of you to make sure that you check out Chris's site, lifeunderthelights.com. And there's a lot of great resources on narrative writing, on a lot of other things, EMS. And Chris is just an amazing writer and educator, and you should take advantage of his site as a resource. You can find links to all that over on the site for this episode. So check out the show notes for this particular episode to find links to Chris's site and some of the other things we discussed in this particular tip segment. And that wraps up part 2 of this 2-part segment on narrative writing skills. And again, thanks to Chris Kaiser for coming on the show and taking some time out of his busy schedule to catch up with me one evening last week, or a couple weeks ago actually now. And I do want to remind you that part 1 of this episode, if you haven't caught it, is available in last week's show. So you can head over and find that at mediccast.com/blog, or if you get the show in iTunes and perhaps you missed it, just go into your podcast section in iTunes or in your Zune marketplace. You may have missed an episode, and you can just click get the episode. Right next to the episode, kind of grayed out, there should be a link to download it. You just click that link and get that episode. So you can catch up if you missed it for some reason. And a lot of good stuff in the first half of this segment, just as much as the last one. So I hope you will follow up on that. And again, we can all, no matter who you are and how long you've been doing this, we can all use some assistance and some review on how to improve our narrative skills and our report writing and documentation. There's always something we can pick up there, and always room for improvement in everything we do. Guess what, folks? That's going to wrap up this week's episode of the MedicCast. Again, I want to remind you to make sure you follow up on the resources and information and tips and links, everything discussed in this episode, all available over in the show notes at mediccast.com/blog. If you need to ask any specific questions or have any specific comments, I welcome you leaving a comment right on the website. And not a lot of you have been doing that lately, and I'm not sure why, but click those comment links or click the Facebook or Twitter share buttons or whatever. Share and comment, because that's one of the ways we get discussion going, and I will comment back whenever you leave a comment over there. It's just like sending me an email. I get an email notifying me of the comment, and then I can get back on there and respond. So I do respond back to you no matter how you leave a comment, as much as I can, and that is the way I do it. You can also get a hold of me, of course, email podmedic@mac.com, the voicemail line 941-306-3342, 941-30-MEDIC, and you can also catch up with me on Facebook and Twitter. You can find me there under the handle PodMedic. We're going to go ahead and wrap up now with some PodSafe music. This is a song I haven't played in quite a while from the PodSafe Music Network, music.podshow.com. This is Sugar Mama from Roscoe Chenye. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. You can find a link to his stuff in the show notes. Go ahead and head over there, and when you do, if you like what you hear, let him know you heard it here on the MedicCast. And we want to thank Roscoe for sharing his cool songs. And in the meantime, we'll kind of head out as we get into the music here. I do want to remind you to keep a couple of things in mind. And you guys know what they are. Scene safety, BSI.
Sugar mama, where you getting your sugar from? Sugar mama, where you getting your sugar from? You must have got it from your daddy down on the sugar farm, where you shaking like jelly, and it tight like jam. Oh, you shaking like jelly, and it tight like jam. Just a little bit more, baby, and I'ma thank you, ma'am. Sugar mama, what you trying to do to me? Sugar mama, what you trying to do to me? I ain't got enough sugar just to sweeten my tea. Sugar mama, where you getting your sugar from? Sugar mama, where you getting your sugar from? You must have got it from your daddy down on the sugar farm. Sugar mama, what you trying to do to me? Sugar mama, what you trying to do to me? I ain't got enough sugar, baby, to sweeten my tea.